All right, and welcome to the second day of Southeast Kansas Pride. We're coming out is the theme for this year's Pride, and yesterday, boy, did we ever come out. Thank you to all who turned out to our first Lunch and Learn workshop yesterday and our panel last night. Before we begin today, a few housekeeping notes. We have had to cancel some of our in-person events due to COVID. This Thursday, we had a social planned for Thursday at 7. We have had to cancel that because we weren't able to move it outside. However, we did include part of a social for our Saturday event, which has also changed. Our Saturday event will be at the Riverside Park on September 11th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the band shell. And that will include a social and picnic, live entertainment, guest speakers, and more. So you don't want to miss that on this Saturday, September 11th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Riverside Park band shell. Those of you that are attending the drag show, if you've already bought a ticket, you should have received an email last week. But we've had to change the drag show as well. We have now moved that to the 4-H building at Riverside Park, and we've had to scale it back. We've asked Dusty Ray Bottoms to postpone their visit until it's safer to congregate here in Montgomery County in large quantities. We want everybody to be able to come out and see Dusty perform as well as the other queens that we have, queens and kings we have coming. But this year, our drag show is now at the 4-H building at Riverside Park and Zoo. The doors open at 7 and the show starts at 7:30, and we have all of your favorite queens coming from Wichita. If you haven't purchased your tickets already, do so by tomorrow night at projectqna.org. VIP tickets are $20 and general admission tickets are $5. The prices will go up the day of the event. But today you're here to see our Lunch and Learn workshop. The yin and yang of mindful self-compassion is presented by Dr. Tanya R. Cochran. Dr. Cochran joined the English and Communications program at Union College, Lincoln, Nebraska in July of 2005. She specializes in writing and oral communication, as well as behavioral science, especially relishing classes that strengthen interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. Ongoing research and publication topics include the rhetoric of popular culture, narratology, media paratext, and media fandom, but her passion for whole person wellness has led her to focus on grief and trauma recovery, mindfulness, and self-compassion research and training. She is a teacher in training for mindful self-compassion through the University of California, San Diego Center for Mindfulness. Please welcome Dr. Cochran.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I've not been in a Zoom session where I don't get to see who's here, so that's a little new for me. So those of you who are out there, welcome. And I have a few slides I'm going to share with you, but also want to focus on the practices that I'd like to bring to you today, because the goal of what we're doing is to help support each of you in living a more full, satisfying, nurtured life. So let me just share my screen here.
Personal and intrapersonal skills.
And hopefully everyone can see that. All right. So yes, I'm speaking with you today about the yin and yang of mindful self-compassion, two sides of a practice that I myself have benefited greatly from, and that is why I have pursued further education to become a teacher of mindful self-compassion. So I'm happy to share a little bit of that with you today. Before we begin with that, I just want to express gratitude for the land and Indigenous peoples where I am. I am not sure of in your area, but here in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I am, I want to acknowledge the First Nations of Eastern Nebraska, the Ponca, Pawnee, Omaha, and Otto, Missouri, past and present, on whose traditional land Union College, where I am right now and where I'm teaching, is located. I'm seated in the Otto, Missouri Treaty of 1833. I both honor this land and offer gratitude for the many people who have been its caretakers through the generations and continue to care for it today. I also want to share with you and be very open about my own positionality and identity. I identify as a straight, white, cisgender woman who grew up in the US South and has lived in Nebraska for nearly 2 decades. I also identify as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. I don't self-identify as an ally. I allow others to give me that title if they wish, and I humbly accept that honor if it's offered to me. I used to call myself an ally, but as I've listened more over the last several years, I realize it's best if others decide if I'm an ally or not. And so, again, I do accept that if it's offered to me as an honor. I'm humbled if that happens. So just an overview of what I'm bringing to you today. First of all, I want to explain what self-compassion is and explain the 3 elements that make up what it is. And then I'll just briefly review the benefits of practicing self-compassion. And then what I really want to spend the most time on is exploring with you the yin, or gentle, nurturing, tender side of self-compassion, and the yang, fierce, protective, courageous aspects of self-compassion through guided practices. So you will be able to do these things with me on your side of the screen. I won't see you doing them, but I will lead you in some of these practices so that you can take these away. Practical things you can do every day to care for yourself, to give yourself the compassion that you deserve, simply by being a human being. So let's start with the 3 elements of self-compassion. So we have a foundation for what we're going to actually do. Self-compassion is treating ourselves in the same way we would treat someone we love and care about, especially when hurting. Okay, so compassion is most often needed when we are suffering. When we are happy and everything feels like it's going okay, we don't often think about needing or wanting compassion from others. But when we feel that we've failed, or someone has been cruel to us, or we're hard on ourselves, maybe we think that we've made a big mistake. This is especially when we want to be empathetic with others, but also with ourselves. And the reason we have that self in the self-compassion is that we actually tend to treat others much better than we treat ourselves. And that's not a bad thing that we treat other people well, but we deserve the same good treatment that we think others deserve. So self-compassion has these 3 aspects to them. This is the work of Dr. Kristin Neff, and we'll see a little bit of work from her colleague, Christopher Germer. The 2 of them really spearheaded the study and practice of self-compassion and self-compassion training here in the United States. So we have these 3 aspects that make up self-compassion, or elements: self-kindness versus self-judgment. And as Dr. Neff says, self-compassion entails being warm and understanding toward ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, rather than ignoring our pain or flagellating ourselves with self-criticism. I don't know about you, but I have what counselors and therapists call a harsh inner critic. So I have a voice in my head. Some of that voice is maybe a bit from family members from early life, or teachers from early life, or in my case, in my context, maybe some religious leaders in early life, that they're kind of mixed in with my own voice, and they can be quite harsh sometimes. I've been practicing self-compassion actively for about 6 years now, and I can personally tell you that it has changed that inner voice, softened it so much. So self-kindness versus self-judgment. When we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, those are the very times that if someone else was experiencing that, we would treat them most likely with kindness, hopefully. hopefully, right? Ideally. So why don't we do that for ourselves? The second element is common humanity versus isolation. And Dr. Neff says, self-compassion involves recognizing that suffering and personal inadequacy is part of the shared human experience, something that we all go through rather than being something that happens to me alone. And again, I know I've experienced this. Most of the time when I feel that I have failed or made a big mistake, or I don't feel like enough, I think I'm the only person that feels this way. And that isolation actually adds a layer of suffering. Just yesterday, I was talking to a colleague here at Union about feeling completely overwhelmed by the beginning of the school year. We're only in our third week of school, middle of the third week, and I already feel behind. I have a stack of grading to do and feeling like I'm just barely, one step ahead of students. And then when I shared this with her yesterday, she said, oh, I feel the exact same way. And then shared what, her concerns are. And in that moment, I realized again, my self-compassion training, I have to remind myself that I am not the only person who feels this way. And that is not to minimize what I'm experiencing. My struggle is valid and real, and so is hers, but I'm not alone. I'm not alone. So many of the things that we feel as human beings are not unique to us. So we don't want to minimize our experience, but we also want to remember that we aren't alone. And then the third element is mindfulness versus over identification. And Dr. Neff explains it this way: mindfulness is a non-judgmental, receptive mind state in which one observes thoughts and feelings as they are, without trying to suppress or deny them. We cannot ignore our pain and feel compassion for it at the same time. At the same time, mindfulness requires that we not over-identify with thoughts and feelings so that we are caught up and swept away by negative reactivity. This is very easy. It is easy to get swept up in negative reactivity. If I start that spiral of because I'm behind, I'm not a good teacher, which is not true. All teachers can be behind at one time, but that doesn't make them a bad teacher, right? So think of maybe an example in your own experience that you can map onto this idea of mindfulness. So how would I do that? In my example I gave you, I would say, okay, I feel overwhelmed. I'm not going to push that away. I'm not going to deny that I feel overwhelmed. And I'm not going to ignore the pain that arises over that overwhelm. But I'm also not going to over-identify with that overwhelm and say, I am not overwhelmed itself, right? I am not overwhelmed. I like the scholar Susan David, who does a lot of work with emotional intelligence and emotional literacy. And she says, try saying, I feel overwhelmed versus I am overwhelmed, as if it's our identity versus something we are just experiencing. Keyword here is non-judgmental, to let things be as they are without judgment. And again, these are practices, so we're not all perfect at this, and there's no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as arriving. It is an ongoing practice of noticing what we're feeling, being able to let it be as it is, and often it passes on its own. Okay, so those three elements, self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness, make up the definition that the program for mindful self-compassion uses. What are some benefits of self-compassion? I could go deep into the research with you, but I felt I would want to spend more time on the practices than giving you some quotes from academic articles. So let me summarize by listing some of them for us and then moving right into our practices today. Research shows that people who have high self-compassion experience these and other benefits. Highly self-compassionate people acknowledge their pain and thus are able to begin healing. What we can speak, we can actually address. What we can see, what we can name, we can actually address. They are able to accept compassion from others. I struggle with this. I don't know if you've ever experienced being really hurt and someone trying to offer you kindness and you actually pulling away. I have done that, like, leave me alone. We want to pull into our shell, but opening ourselves to others' compassion, it's vulnerable and it's healing. They feel their emotions rather than denying or ignoring them. They have greater self-awareness than those who are highly self-critical. They forgive themselves more readily than self-critical people, which again allows for their healing and growth. They learn to be deeply kind to themselves and in turn to others, so it actually strengthens relationships with other people. They create nurturing inner voices. If you have experienced the harsh inner critic as I have, it is a welcome change to have a nurturing inner voice. They have a great capacity to face rather than turn away from painful experiences, their own and others. They are resilient, and they experienced reduced symptoms of depression, anxiety, shame, and feelings of inferiority. They connect with others rather than isolate themselves. They orient themselves toward that which gives them joy. So I see what I'm bringing today as a gift to you. I hope that that's how you experience the practices that we are about to engage in. A gift to you to increase your joy in living. Before we do any of these practices, however, I want to just say one word about safety. And you see this image from the film Backdraft. It's an old movie now, but if you're familiar with it, or you just recognize the name even, this will make a lot of sense to you. When we give ourselves compassion, we can experience what is called emotional backdraft. This is a firefighting term that describes what happens when a door in a burning house is open and oxygen goes in and feeds the fire. And then, there's kind of an explosion there because of that rushing in of oxygen. And just as I was saying on the previous slide, we've probably all experienced that feeling hurt and not wanting anyone to be nice to us. It sounds like a weird, an ironic thing, but it's true. Like, leave me alone. I'm upset right now. Even when I'm upset with myself, I don't treat me with any love. Because it's vulnerable to experience someone else's care. So there are some sayings for mindful self-compassion that help capture this idea of backdraft when we're practicing actually giving ourselves compassion. One of them is, when we give ourselves unconditional love, we discover the conditions under which we were unloved. So it's that feeling of the contrast between unconditional love and not it having unconditional love. That can be very painful. Or love reveals everything unlike itself. So I just want to put you on notice that as we go through some of the basic practices of mindful self-compassion, the tools that we can use to give ourselves compassion, if you participate at home and you experience any discomfort that does not feel good to you, I want you to feel free to stop the practice, to turn off the screen, to turn the volume off, to actually exit our call here if you are experiencing any discomfort that is intolerable to you, okay? All of us respond differently to these practices, and I have chosen for you today the least triggering practices that there are. But if you aren't used to giving yourself the love that you deserve, you might experience some backdraft. So please be aware of what's going on in your mind, in your heart, in your body. So if your being gives you any signal that this is too much, please take care of yourselves. Do what you need to do to take care of yourselves. Okay, so just a final few words about the difference between yin and yang of self-compassion, and then I'm going to actually turn the PowerPoint off and lead you through some practices. So as Christopher Germer and both Dr. Germer and Dr. Neff say, the yin of self-compassion contains the attributes of being with our pain in a compassionate way, comforting, reassuring, and validating ourselves. The yang of self-compassion is associated with acting in the world, protecting, providing for, and motivating ourselves. So it's the difference between the kind of tender energy, maybe of pulling in, of nesting, protecting, again, comforting, reassuring. We might imagine this as a feminine or a motherly force, and the yang as acting. So we want to come out and do things and move our bodies. We might also think of winter, fall and winter, as pulling in and settling down for the long winter, and spring and summer as active and getting out there. I know in Lincoln, as soon as it's warm in the spring, everyone is outside to exercise, right? So these forces work together, of course, using that metaphor from the religious aspect, the Eastern idea of yin and yang, that these two, we want to be in balance with each other, and that each contains a little bit of the other. So I think you'll understand exactly what I mean when we do some of the practices that I have prepared for you. So I'm going to exit out of my screen here, and I'm going to begin with some yin mindful self-compassion practices that can help you support yourself. The first one I'm going to talk about is what we call in the program for mindful self-compassion, soothing and supportive touch. So we want to be able to call on the resources that each one of us has right inside of us. We don't need to buy anything for this. We don't need a special device, or we don't need to even read a book to learn more about this. We have so many resources right inside of us that we can call on. And one of them is soothing or supportive touch. I do want to acknowledge that some of these practices involve having certain physical abilities. So adapting this practice if you are not able to physically do them. I haven't discovered how this particular practice could be adapted. It might work to have a loved one practice with you and actually provide the touch. But if you are able to practice with me, I'm going to ask you to follow me through a little guided practice on soothing and supportive touch. At home, you can, if you are sitting, just check in with yourself. See that you're sitting in a position that's comfortable to you. Maybe you want to shift a little bit. If you're physically able to put your feet on the floor, you may also stand for this practice if you would like, in your own space, whatever is most comfortable for you. One of the reasons that touch is so supportive is that we have, like other mammals, a system that responds to caring touch. And so just as we think of animals, if you've ever had kittens, I'm a cat person, and you've seen the kittens being born. And what does the mother do as they're born? She licks them and cleans them up. And there's all this nurturing touch. And so these are some of the practices that we humans can do just as human babies. We hold them, we wrap them, we swaddle them, we cuddle them. If we're truly caring for them, touch is such an essential part of that. As adults, we forget that we have this capability to soothe ourselves with our own touch. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through a couple of different types of touch that we can offer ourselves when we are not feeling great about the world or ourselves right now. All right, so if you want to follow me at home, I invite you to close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you, or you can partially leave your eyes partially open, maybe focus a downward gaze on a spot on the floor or maybe on your lap. Or you can keep your eyes fully open, whatever is most comfortable for you. So let's try a couple of these different options for touch. What you want to pay attention to is which one of these or which several of these really resonate with you. Okay, some won't. You'll be like, no, that doesn't really help me. And others may feel like, oh, this is very comforting to me. Okay, our first one is pressing your palms gently against one another and simply feeling the warmth of your own hands as they're touching. And I'll be quiet for just a few seconds so you can experience the pressure, feeling the pressure and the warmth of your own hands. Another option would be one hand cupped in the other. So I'm holding my hand up, so hopefully you can see. If you are unable to see, I'm putting I'm holding out my left palm, and I'm placing with palms up, and I'm placing my right hand inside of my left hand and cupping. And I'll let you can put your hands closer to your lap, and I'll again be quiet for just a moment and let you feel what that feels like for you. Many people experience this hand position as open and accepting of compassion, right? Being filled, your hands being filled with something good. Okay, the next one is two hands over your heart. So I'm putting my right hand on my heart and putting my left hand over the top of my right hand. So like crisscross. And I'll just let you feel that for a moment. Okay, another position might be making a fist with one hand and putting that over your heart, and then cupping that fist with another hand, with the other hand. or perhaps just one hand on heart. Another option is to gently stroke your chest back and forth, or in small circles. So you can try both if you want. Okay, another option is one hand on heart and one hand on belly. Or two hands on belly. Or one hand on a cheek. Or cradling your face with both hands. Or crossing your arms and giving yourself a little hug. Or gently stroking your arms. So as you can see, your own touch, or adapting this in any way you need because of your physical needs, can be one way to comfort yourself. Some of these are very useful even in meeting settings when you're starting to feel yourself activated and frustrated with others. No one will know that you're comforting yourself if you just use one hand to rub your own shoulder, or you cup your hands in your lap. Or you might come up with your own way of doing this, perhaps rubbing, using the palm of your hand to rub or pat your leg underneath the table, in a meeting room. Okay, so this is what we call soothing and supportive touch. Again, your resources, you have this ability inside of you and with you at all times. Another practice that I want to guide you through, and this is more of a meditation. So you can, again, check with your own body and see what is most comfortable for you. This is a very short practice. And this is, I'll do this a little bit shorter than normally we would do this. It usually would take about 10 minutes to practice, but I'm going to do it in about 5 minutes with you so that I can then show you a few of the yang practices before we open it for question and answers. So it's going to go a little bit faster than it's intended to go, but it's a simple practice that I find very, very useful called the self-compassion break. And once you learn it, it can move very quickly. And so it becomes a resource that I use pretty regularly with my interpersonal relationships with friends and family, but at work as well. If I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed or unworthy at the moment or not enough, this is a good practice that helps me move through some of those emotions. So again, you can do this sitting. If you're at home and you're very comfortable and you're near a sofa and you'd like to lie down, you are welcome to do that as well. And I'm going to ask you to, again, close your eyes, or if you feel more comfortable with them partially open, choose a spot that you can just rest your eyes on. And if you feel most comfortable with your eyes fully open, that is fine as well. This practice can cause a little bit of backdraft if you pick a topic that is particularly sensitive to you. So I'm going to ask you, as part of the practice, to not choose something that is really, really, really difficult or challenging or painful. Okay, so something in the very mild discomfort realm. All right. Okay, let's begin. Think of a situation in your life that is difficult, that is causing you some stress right now. Perhaps it is a mild health problem or a little disagreement or problem in an important relationship. Perhaps a work stressor. Or perhaps someone disrespected you because of your age, your ability, or another aspect of your identity. And again, please choose a problem that is mild to moderate, not a big problem. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves as we're first learning this skill of self-compassion. So if you have that difficulty in mind, allow yourself to see, hear, and feel your way into the problem. To see, hear, and feel your way into the problem, so that you experience some of the uneasiness of this in your body. Where do you feel it the most in your body? In your chest, stomach, heart area? Make contact with this discomfort. Once you're in touch with that discomfort, say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Other options include, this hurts, or ouch, or this is stress. Next, say to yourself again, slowly and clearly and warmly, suffering is a part of living. This is common humanity. Other options might be I'm not alone, or me too, or others in my community would feel a lot like me in this situation. And if you haven't done it already, I invite you, if it feels right to you, to put one or both of your hands over your heart or wherever it feels supportive, as we practice some other options, so that you can feel the warmth of your own hands and say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I give myself what I need. This is self-kindness. Perhaps you want to ask yourself, what quality of self-compassion do I need right now? Do I need the language of yin, the nurturing, accepting, validating energy, the tender response? Or do I need some yang language right now? Some no, I will not allow myself to be harmed in this way. Or may I have the courage and strength to make a change? If you're having difficulty finding the right words, imagine that a dear friend or loved one is having the same problem as you. What would you say to this person, heart to heart, without giving advice? What message would you like to deliver to that person? Now, can you offer yourself the same message? When you feel ready, if your eyes were closed, gently open your eyes and join me again here on the screen. Okay, so we've explored just two so far, soothing and supportive touch, and what is called the self-compassion break. They're just those 3 steps to the self-compassion break: noticing and naming what is bothering you or what is causing pain, hurt, or suffering, and acknowledging it, saying, this hurts, ouch, this is a moment of suffering. And part 2, acknowledging and reminding yourself that suffering is a part of life. We all experience this. Other people feel this way. I'm not alone. We all have struggles at times. And then the third part, which is, may I be kind to myself. What do I need in this moment? Perhaps we need compassion. Perhaps we need our own acceptance. Perhaps we need our own forgiveness. Perhaps we want to act or be strong or patient. What is it that we need in this moment? Maybe I need a nap or a walk or a snack. Those things as well. Okay, the last little bit before we go to Q&A, I want to share with you is a little bit about yang energy with self-compassion. And this, if it feels silly to some people, but you're not on the screen. So you're at home, you don't have to worry about, if you are at home, you don't have to worry about anyone seeing you perhaps. If you're at work, you might want to just watch, or if you feel comfortable doing these things, I really encourage you to actually do this with me. But one of the ways that we practice stirring up the yang energy that we need And this is what Kristin Neff calls fierce self-compassion. Again, it's the protective, energizing, activating, action-oriented energy of self-compassion. Obviously, when we're hurting, sometimes we need that tender, gentle pulling in, but sometimes we need to stand up for ourselves and say no to people. And many of us, depending on our identity and the ways in which aspects of our identity intersect, the idea of intersectionality, the fact that I am a woman and the fact that I am also physically small, I'm only 5'1" 3/4 of an inch. These two pieces of who I am sometimes intersect to make me feel very cautious around certain people, right? And so sometimes I have to set some physical boundaries. For example, I cannot see tall people's faces if they're standing too close to me. So I have to say, can you please step back so that I can see you? That's not, fierceness is not fighting. It's simply standing up for ourselves. So sometimes I have to stand up for myself by saying, please step back so I can see your face while we're speaking to each other. There are other times, though, when we do need a fiercer, more self-protective energy. Perhaps we are experiencing some level of abuse. Finding within ourselves the ability to, and I don't want to abuse situations are very complex, okay? And we're not going deep into that work. And sometimes we don't leave certain situations because it's not safe to do so at that moment. And there is inside of each of you the ability to have this fierceness, this yang side of self-compassion. So very quickly, I'm going to stand up and hopefully you can see me well. Let me turn my camera a little bit. But I do this with students as well. And again, they find it's really uncomfortable at first, especially when you're doing it in a large group and people are looking at you. But we find this energy because it is action oriented. We have to actually move our bodies to start to embody it. Okay, so movement is a part of this energy, whereas stillness is maybe a part of the yin energy. So I would like you, if you're doing this with me at home, I want you to look down at your feet and you want to spread your feet just a little bit farther than shoulder width apart so that you can ground into the floor with your feet. This is really good to do if you're barefoot. If you're not right now, that's okay, because we only have a few minutes to try this, but try this later, perhaps without any shoes or socks on, so you can feel the carpet, or doing this outside in the grass. Sometimes I do this outside with students so they can feel the earth under their feet. So we're grounding into the earth, the floor, and then if you're able, again, physically able to do so, bend your knees just a little bit into a stance. We're almost like we're getting in a sumo wrestler kind of stance, all right? And hold your hands in whatever position feels right for you. But what I'm going to ask you to do is take your right or left hand, whichever one feels most comfortable for you. Maybe you're left-handed or right-handed. You have a dominant hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to use my right hand. And I'm simply going to, in this stance, protective and ready stance, I'm going to push my hand out in front of me with my wrist bent upwards, so my palm is flat outward, and I'm going to say no while I do this. All right, here I go. 1, 2, 3. No. I'm going to do it again. Hopefully you're doing this with me. I'm not alone. No. And one more time. No. All right. There are many other practices that we could talk about for the yang energy. but this is one of them. This stance is a power stance, reminding us that we are strong. And we're not going to go out, I'm not going to go out of this room and do that to one of my colleagues that I'm frustrated with or struggling with. But it is a way of practicing what is, again, inside of us, that we have this ability to protect ourselves. And so we get in the mindset of that fierce side of protection. Oh, this is such just skimming the surface today with you. But again, we have these 3 practices of soothing and supportive touch, self-compassion break, and the fierce practice of saying no. These are 3 of many, and I recommend that you just Google self-compassion or self-compassion practices. There are a lot of guided practices online. Dr. Kristin Neff and Dr. Christopher Germer, they all have on their websites many audio versions of all of the mindful self-compassion practices. I highly recommend, because it's a longer meditation, and didn't want to take 20 minutes for one here today, but I highly recommend, as a way to begin, one called affectionate breathing. Okay, leaving some time for some questions and answers.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And thank you for guiding us through those practices as well. You kind of touched on this already just a second ago, but one of the viewers wondered where else could they look for information on how to practice mindful self-compassion?
Yes, excellent. Yes, so both Dr. Kristin Neff and Dr. Christopher Germer, Germer, both of them have their personal websites with lots of resources on their websites. And you can also, again, Google mindful self-compassion, and that will lead you to the Center for Mindfulness at the University of San Diego, or California, San Diego. And there are a lot of resources on their page as well. YouTube has lots of videos. And if you're a book reader, I do recommend both Christopher Germer and Kristin Neff's individual books. Dr. Neff's book is simply called Self-Compassion. It has a subtitle, but and there are now, if you again use the term self-compassion to do a book search on platforms such as Amazon or other booksellers, you'll see that there are many resources available now that have just come about in the last 5 years. So there are workbooks that can guide you through the practice at home. And you can also join an 8-week program that those of us who are trained in this offer in our areas, online as well as in person. It's an 8-week course, very similar to mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, if any of you have heard of that. The practice, the MSC program, Mindful Self-Compassion program, is also, it's built on that same idea. So it's 8 weeks, 3 hours a week of guided practice through all of these things.
And there's one other question. Is there one thing that we could all do today to help curb our self-judgment?
Ooh. I don't know if there's only one thing, but to curb our self-judgment. I think one of my favorite practices, and again, this can be depending on your growing up experience, this could be triggering. So just take that, remember that as I say this. One thing that has helped me the most with self-judgment is in the course of learning these practices and putting them into daily practice, I have an 8x10 picture of myself when I was 6 years old, and I framed it and I have put it beside my bed at home. This could be a small picture. It could be a picture on your phone. It could, you could have one at your workspace as well, like anywhere you feel comfortable. But I look at that picture to remind myself that I am that same little girl. And so when I think about how I would treat her, it's much easier to treat my adult self better. I think that's one of my favorite ways of reminding myself that I am precious, right? That little girl, she is innocent. She only has big hopes and dreams, and she deserves love and belong. She's worthy of love and belonging, as Brene Brown says. She is worthy of love and belonging simply because she exists. So I think the practice of a photograph of yourself can be one way to remind yourself, don't be so hard on that little kid.
I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation, and I love all of the practices that we got to do. I know I was over here doing them myself, and I forgot that I was on the Zoom call. So thank you. It was a great presentation. Thank you all of you who joined us today. And once again, thank you to Dr. Cochran for a wonderful and timely presentation. I think we all need to be practicing this now more than ever in the chaotic world that we live in. So if you have a few minutes this afternoon before you head back to work, I will throw up a link in the comments to a survey. If you want to take a minute to fill out the survey, we'll be doing some drawings next week for all of our survey respondents for prizes. If you're not doing anything tonight, log on at 7 p.m. for our Growing Up Out panel discussion, which is part of our Q&A talk series in partnership with the Independence Public Library. So thank you, Dr. Cochran, for spending your afternoon with us, and thank you all who logged on. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.